Most entrepreneurs are running a powerful machine with outdated software, a cluttered user interface, and no understanding of how their system actually works. You're scaling a business, maybe making good money, but your internal systems are still running like they were when you were just getting started. And the result? You're working harder than you should be, feeling totally scattered despite your success, and constantly hitting performance or profit ceilings that just strategy alone cannot break through. The Clarity Stack is my core integration for upgrading your internal performance systems. Think of it like a personal operating system for entrepreneurs, designed to align your cognition, behavior, and energy so you can scale with less resistance and more precision. I'm Jesse, and over the last decade, I've studied performance and organizational psychology and have worked with 6 to 8 figure entrepreneurs. And through that, I've learned that sustainable scaling isn't only just about better business strategy. It's about better internal systems for sustained performance. I've built the Clarity Stack like a technology stack, and it's 3 tiers or layers that integrate with one another, kind of like a tech infrastructure. And each tier builds on the next, refining your clarity, enhancing your execution, and rewiring your system to operate at a higher level. And this isn't just a mindset framework, it's a systems level upgrade to help you operate like a high performance machine without burning out in the process. So let me break down the 3 layers of the Clarity Stack. And that first layer is your iOS, your internal operating system. Now, for those that don't know, I share the same birthday as Steve Jobs, and that's meant a lot to me, and I'm a Apple fanboy all the way, but I have no affiliation with the company. This is just my play on words. Your iOS, your internal operating system, is the base layer. It's your cognitive wiring, your emotional tendencies, and the internal rhythms that define how you think, process, and perform. Tier number 2 is cognitive ergonomics, and that's going to be your user interface. This is how you structure your habits, design your environment, and reduce friction as much as possible to make execution feel more seamless. And that third layer is performance circuitry. This is your core power source. This is where you access flow, regulate your nervous system, and implement the recovery systems that generate the energy and focus required to sustain high performance. And when these 3 tiers are optimized and aligned, you don't just work smarter, you operate at a fundamentally higher level of internal organization. So let me show you how each tier works and how they integrate to create effortless high performance. So coming back into the iOS, that internal operating system, this is the base layer that's going to govern everything else after it. And this is the fundamental cognitive wiring, emotional patterns, and internal rhythms, as I said before. And most entrepreneurs are running on, let's call them default settings that they've installed years ago when they started their business or their pursuits. And they wonder why they can't perform at a level that their current business demands. And that's because their software is outdated. And these 4 components of the iOS determine how effectively your internal system operates. And so the first component, as you'll see here, is your performance identity. That's how you see yourself, your beliefs, your self-concept, your standards, and it's all about aligning your self-perception with your performance goals. Because at the end of the day, when your identity matches what you're trying to achieve and your goals, consistency becomes automatic. And if you want to learn more about that alignment gap that this speaks to, I have another video on that. Through this, you don't have to force discipline through sheer willpower, which does drain out quickly, but rather you're operating in alignment with who you are. This is the fundamental difference of I want to be disciplined versus I am someone who follows through. And that identity shift changes everything about how you approach execution. So second is rhythm alignment, and that's all about scheduling work around your cognitive and energetic peaks rather than just the convenience on your calendar. And your brain has natural ultradian cycles, or ultradian rhythms as they're called. And when you design your system around these rhythms instead of fighting them, you're able to access different levels of mental clarity. And what I see is a lot of people will force focus rhythms when their system is actually in recovery mode. But elite performers, they actually design their days around their natural performance cycles. Third is understanding your cognitive profile. And that's how you naturally think, how you process information and make decisions. That's made up of also your personality type. Some of our brains are more linear processors, whereas others are going to be a lot more intuitive. Some of us might look for that complete data set to make a decision, whereas some of us, we might be able to thrive on partial information and go with our gut. So when you understand your personal cognitive wiring, you can stop forcing systems that don't match your cognitive style or your brain's architecture. And this is the fundamental reason why most productivity advice completely falls flat. And it's because it's designed for people with different cognitive profiles than yours. And finally, within this layer is calibrating your emotions or emotional calibration. And that's understanding those emotional patterns and their effect on your clarity and performance. Because at the end of the day, your emotional state directly impacts your cognitive capacity. And when you can calibrate those emotional patterns strategically, you're able to maintain clarity under pressure. And so a core factor of this is, of course, emotional intelligence and integrating it in order to stay focused and resilient under pressure. And so with that said, it's not about suppressing emotions. It's about understanding how they influence you and your system's performance and learning how to work with them and use it as data rather than letting it disrupt you. And so optimizing your iOS and giving it that upgrade that it needs allows you to actually fundamentally operate at that totally different level of internal organization. So tier 2 is your cognitive ergonomics. And this is what you could say your user interface. And it's how you design environments and systems based on how the brain actually works in order to reduce friction and protect your focus. And so if your iOS is that base layer software, then your cognitive ergonomics is how you design your external world and environment to support those internal systems. The 4 components of this tier are all about minimizing cognitive load and maximizing execution and efficiency. So the first component of this layer is energy architecture. And this is about designing your environment around your daily energy cycles. This goes beyond just when you work to how you structure your physical and digital environments to support different brain states and energy states and different cognitive demands as well. And so any high cognitive load work requires a high energy environment, whereas recovery work get recovery environments or lower cognitive environments. When your environment matches your energy state, you're able to really flow with your internal system rather than fighting friction. So the second component is habit architecture, and that's all about creating habits and structuring automated behaviors that reinforce your identity and your ideal performance or your goals. And with that said, it's not just about building more and more habits. It's actually about architecting better habit systems to reinforce your performance identity. And what this does is it also reduces your decision fatigue because you feel more aligned. And so when your habits are properly architected, they handle what would normally be the work of discipline automatically. So the third component is ritual engineering. And this is about establishing specific rituals for different performance states. So there's focus rituals, recovery rituals, transition rituals, and these are the bridges between different cognitive modes that help you access the right mental state according to the task. The most elite performers, they don't rely on motivation. They use engineered rituals to access peak states and flow consistently. So finally, in this layer, we have context management. And this is all about managing your environments to minimize input fatigue or cognitive overwhelm. Your brain processes thousands of environmental inputs every single minute. When you manage contexts strategically, you preserve your cognitive resources for the higher impact work that demands most of your attention. And this is the difference between feeling totally scattered and feeling sharp and dialed in. When your cognitive ergonomics are optimized, your environment becomes a performance amplifier rather than the source of friction. And so moving down to tier 3, we have performance circuitry. And this is your power source. And this circuitry, when formed right, enhances your ability to execute under pressure and maintain momentum over time. So if iOS is the base layer of software and ergonomics is the actual interface, performance circuitry is what generates the energy and focus required to sustain performance. And so I'll break down the 4 components of this tier that determine your capacity to sustain excellence. So first we have neuroregulation. This is about the ability to maintain a grounded, adaptable state regardless of the external pressures that you face. And so what that requires is regulating your nervous system. Your nervous system determines whether you're operating from a calm, focused state or a reactive, stressed state. And when you can regulate your nervous system strategically, you're able to maintain way more clarity and precision under pressure. So this isn't just stress management in a psychological sense or an emotional sense. This is about optimizing your nervous system as a performance tool and doing so through actual neuroscience. So the second component is flow activation. And if you've heard me talk about flow, it's just all about creating an immersive work condition where you're able to get into flow, where time disappears and your best work is just flowing out of you effortlessly. And this is super crucial because flow isn't random. It's predictable. When you understand the conditions that create it and you're able to engineer them consistently, then you unlock the floodgates. So when you can access flow on demand, you're not just more productive, you're actually operating from a completely different level of mental clarity and creative capacity to do the work that feels most aligned to you, that strikes the balance between difficulty and skill. So third, we have recovery intelligence, or RQ, RIQ. I haven't decided that one yet. But this is all about aligning your recovery with your cognitive and physiological rhythms. Elite performers, they understand that recovery doesn't just mean the absence of work and just doing nothing. It's actually the foundation that makes sustained high performance possible because they implement active forms of recovery. And what that allows is when your RQ or your recovery intelligence is optimized, you're able to sustain peak output without burning out your entire system or that base layer. And so finally, in the performance circuitry layer, we have the execution protocol, and that's prioritizing clarity and action efficiency. And this is how you move from decision to action with minimal friction and maximum precision. And this is where you completely close what I call that execution gap that I've talked about. And so when your execution protocol is optimized, you don't just know exactly what to do, but you're able to actually take action and do it with speed and accuracy. And this right here is where all three tiers or layers integrate in creating effortless high performance. Your iOS, that provides the clarity. Your ergonomics, they reduce the friction and provide the framework to take action. And your circuitry generates the power to actually build the momentum. Here's what makes the clarity stack so powerful. These layers don't operate independently. They're designed to work together the same as our iPhones or any other tech infrastructure does. It's all fully integrated. So your iOS, it shapes how you design your cognitive ergonomics. Your ergonomics support you in consistently optimizing your performance circuitry, and your circuitry reinforces and continues to upgrade your iOS, and the cycle continues to repeat. And so this fully integrated stack is the source of exponential high performance and growth. And with them all optimized and aligned, you're not just working harder or smarter, you're operating like that seamless machine. And in this mental clarity, that becomes your default. And so therefore, peak performance actually becomes sustainable and scaling becomes systematic rather than stressful. It's more well-defined. You're not up in the air wondering what to do next. I've seen entrepreneurs double their output while cutting their stress levels in half just by upgrading these three tiers. And so none of it's done just through a better business strategy. It's through better internal systems and architecture. The Clarity Stack, this is one of my core frameworks inside the Clarity Code, and it's how we help high-performing entrepreneurs build the internal systems that make scaling sustainable instead of stressful. So if you're someone that feels like you're lacking clarity or working harder than you need to be, if you want to just upgrade your internal architecture and systems for long-term high performance, then we should probably talk. DM me the word clarity on Instagram at Jesse H. Hoffman, and I'll send over details about how the Clarity Stack and how the Clarity Code can be customized for your specific cognitive profile, your specific business demands, and your own unique performance goals. But start by auditing your own stack. Assess your iOS. Is your performance aligned with your goals? Evaluate your cognitive ergonomics. Is your energy architecture supporting your natural energy rhythms? Or check your performance circuitry. Is your recovery intelligence optimized for sustained performance? Because when you upgrade these systems that run everything else becomes way easier. And that's how you scale like a high performance machine without burning out in the process. So leave a comment below. Which of these layers or components do you want to dial into most? I'll make sure to shoot a comment back with some direct guidance. If you specifically want to learn how to tap into flow on command effortlessly, make sure to watch this next video. I hope you got some value out of this. If so, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Peace.